Skyline, a short story by Lynette Sloan. I wiped the sweat off my brow. It was 11 in the morning and my shirt was already sticking to my back. A long cold beer would be most welcome. I took a left turn into Castle Street, my legs and arms feeling like lead. I no longer cared about the interview I'd been preparing for all week. If I got the job, that would be great. If I didn't get it, I'd try for another one on a cooler day. I slipped off my suit jacket and slung it over my shoulder. My prospective boss wouldn't expect me to wear a jacket in a 32-degree heat wave. A group of lads drove past shouting obscenities. I would have responded, but a wave of dizziness passed over me. I stopped walking and grabbed a railing to steady myself. Not again! The hallucinations always started this way. I'd suffered with them for a couple of months, and this infernal heat was making them worse. The shop fronts and bus shelter went out of focus. I'd read that concentrating on something further away might stop the illusion, or mirage, or whatever it was. I looked past the busy traffic and bustling pedestrians to the end of the street where a tower block stood against the city skyline. It didn't work. The tower block became a tall monolith, its grey slate surfaces blending with the nearer and lower rock formations only feet away. Heat radiated from every surface, distorting my view. A gust of wind brought no relief from the scorching heat. My eyes were drawn to a movement next to my left foot. I swear I felt the tail of a rock lizard brush against my ankle before it scampered onto a rock, then scurried off and hid under a rocky crag. It would rest there on the dusty ground until evening, when it would join its friends catching flies at the waterhole. I shook my head and blinked hard, trying to force the hallucination out of my mind. What was wrong with me? The exhaust fumes escaping from a passing bus caught in my throat. I coughed and opened my eyes. The city had returned. The clock tower read 11:50. I still had plenty of time for that beer. My interview wasn't until midday. I checked my trouser pocket. Good. An extra strong mint would disguise the smell of beer on my breath. I couldn't have my interviewer thinking I had a drinking problem. I crossed the road and stepped inside the Frog and Bucket. It was a silly name for a pub, but if their beer didn't taste like pond water, I didn't care. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the low light inside the crowded bar. A lady called out to her work colleagues from across the room, "Quick, she's here!" The rest of the group of several ladies and gents cheered and broke into a chorus of "Happy birthday!" as a slender middle-aged lady walked through the door in a tight red dress. The singing distorted and became a high note that hurt my ears. I stumbled into the back of an empty chair as the room lost focus. It was much darker now, and the contrast in silence was almost audible as, one by one, the people disappeared, their silhouettes melding into the shapes of several stalagmites and stalactites in what was now a limestone cave. Another hallucination. Somewhere nearby, the drip, drip of spring water splashed onto the rough stone floor. I took a step and winced. I caught my shin on a jagged rock. I looked down. Dry, powdery dust, the same shade as the cave walls, covered my bare feet. A pain shot through my head, and I wiped the sweat off my brow and looked up. The barman was hurrying towards me across the crowded room. My hallucination had gone. "You okay?" he asked. "You took a tumble there and knocked that lady's rum and black over." I apologised to the lady, saying the heat was getting to me, and offered to refill her glass. She smiled and accepted the replacement drink. I took a stool at the bar and downed half a pint of beer. Flat and tasteless, it hardly touched the sides. I placed the glass down on the counter and frowned. The barman walked over to me. "Can I get you another drink?" No, thank you, that was awful. Your pipes need cleaning out. It seemed the barman had several friends in the pub. The heat was getting to everyone. Tempers were short. 4 men strode across the polished floorboards towards me, and as the first one grabbed at my shirt, another wave of dizziness washed over me. I stumbled onto the rocky floor and scrambled towards the mouth of the cave, 4 grizzly bears in hot pursuit. The adrenaline rush gave me the edge, and I ran out into the blistering sun, down a dirt track and into a small group of trees. As I caught my breath, I noticed a slight wound on my arm. I must have caught it on a sharp rock. My pursuers, now 4 burly men wearing dark suits, stood outside the Frog and Bucket, looking up and down the road. I realised I was standing in a small park. My arms stung and my best white shirt was torn. This is it. I'm going crazy, I thought. A skyline that changes into a rocky desert. A monolith where the tower block should be. A cave and 4 grizzly bears. This is more than the heat. There's something really wrong with me. The barman's friends gave up looking for me and walked back inside the pub. I decided to skip the interview and call in at the hospital. A taxi was already waiting at the nearby taxi rank, so I walked across the road and spoke to the driver. "St. Mark's Hospital, please." He nodded and I stepped inside. 10 minutes later, I was standing in the foyer of a brightly lit emergency room. I staggered towards the reception desk, my mouth dry and my head spinning. The hallucinations always began this way. I booked myself in and took a chair. A hard, amorphous chair made of limestone and gypsum. Surely one can't feel hallucinations. I looked up. This cave was extensive, yet familiar. Behind me was the ledge on which I'd been sleeping for the last 15 years. I'd discovered this cave as a young man, just after the bombs obliterated all that I knew, all that anyone knew, and I moved here after the bears took over my much smaller cave a few miles away. The loose stone floor led down to a deep, shaded pool where I gathered water each morning to cook and wash. Soon I would wander further into the cave system and gather wild mushrooms for breakfast, then check my traps in the nearby creek to see what I'd caught for lunch. If I were lucky, there might even be a wild boar. This was a solitary life, one much different from my old life in the city, but it was my reality. A reality where I hadn't seen a living being for over 25 years. And I liked it this way. At last my mind was clear. The city, that was the hallucination.